Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're stepping straight into the shadows of Indian paranormal folklore to examine a truly chilling case study of spirit possession. We're going to map out the complete anatomy of a haunting, uncovering the terrifying characteristics of the entity involved, and, crucially, the unmistakable signs that a full-blown spiritual takeover has begun.
Let's dive right into the terrifying, inciting incident that kicked this whole nightmare off. Picture this. It's a completely deserted, broken-down bus stand at 2 a.m., and it is absolutely pouring rain. The sheer isolation of the setting? That's a crucial element here. In folklore, these anomalous events almost never happen in the safety of the mundane, daylight world. No, they happen on the fringes, in the dark, right when the normal rules of reality just kind of blur.
Section 1. The Haunted Bus Stop, a Deserted Night. So, two transit workers who were actually trying to avoid government authorities made the massive mistake of parking their bus near a notoriously haunted wall just to get some rest. Now, the local lore explicitly warned against this, but the driver insisted they stay put. Just look at how unbelievably fast this situation escalates. At 2 a.m., the conductor spots a beautiful woman in the men's restroom, who then casually walks right through a solid brick wall. I mean, no way, right? But then, by 2:15 a.m., this entity is outside, hovering at an absolutely impossible height and aggressively knocking on the driver's window.
Which brings us to Section 2, Profile of the Entity, Deceptive Appearances.
You see, this entity's primary weapon is pure deception. It lures in unsuspecting victims by appearing as this highly attractive young woman who just needs some directions. But the second that illusion drops, the reality is frankly horrifying. Its true form wears these tattered brown clothes, its facial skin is literally peeling off in flakes, and it emits this wildly pungent, foul odor. And most alarmingly, it can stretch itself to an unnatural height of 8 feet, just to peer directly into the high windows of a parked bus.
Moving on to Section 3, the tragic motive, unresolved trauma.
To really understand why this thing attacks, we have to dig into the traditional folklore mechanics. In these belief systems, spirits are rarely just randomly evil for the sake of it. They're usually anchored to the mortal realm by severe trauma. In South Asian lore, this specific type of entity is classified as a chudayal. Basically, it's a spirit completely fueled by profound grief and rage, usually born from a highly specific tragedy, like a woman who dies a wrongful death before she can fulfill a deeply held desire, such as marriage.
So this spirit is basically stuck on a loop, perpetually reliving her own tragic death. Through the possessed victim, the entity reportedly confessed her actual backstory. She had planned to elope with her lover, but her family found out and poisoned her to protect their quote-unquote honor. She died frothing at the mouth right there at that very bus stop. Because of that, her soul became trapped exactly where her hopes ended. Now she's consumed by jealousy, actively trying to ruin the weddings of anyone who happens to cross her path.
Section 4. Key signs of possession, the takeover.
Following that initial terrifying encounter, the driver actually became possessed, which gives us a systematic and frankly terrifying look at the behavioral signs of a spiritual infection. We're talking about a normal guy transforming into an unrecognizable violent vessel. He suddenly started speaking in distinct female voices. He began crawling up the stairs on all fours, almost like a wild animal. He engaged in brutal self-harm, hitting and strangling himself. And perhaps most disturbingly, he developed this sudden, intense repulsion to his own fiancée, claiming instead that he was having supernatural intercourse with the entity every single night.
The physical limits of the victim's body were completely hijacked, leading to unnatural strength and sheer aggression. In one particularly terrifying incident, while he was being driven to see a healer, the possessed man suddenly lunged and grabbed the steering wheel right out of his cousin's hands. Screaming at the top of his lungs in a woman's voice, he jammed the accelerator and pushed the car to an erratic 120 kilometers per hour, nearly causing a fatal crash. He was risking everyone's lives without a second thought. The psychological takeover was absolute, culminating in these incredibly bizarre nightly compulsions that completely flipped his household upside down. Literally every single night at exactly 1:30 a.m., he would violently consume massive packets of dry, raw rusks. No water, no tea, nothing. Then he'd crawl up to the roof and perform this wild, unnatural dance until the early hours of the morning. His family could do nothing but watch in sheer horror as their son was basically puppeted by an unseen force.
And that brings us to Section 5, the spiritual diagnosis, environmental signs.
You see, in these belief systems, possession isn't just about the primary victim. That dark energy actually bleeds out into the entire surrounding environment. Physically, innocent family members might wake up to find unexplained blue bruises on their thighs or sudden black patches on their necks. Environmentally, the house itself gets infected. We're talking echoes of heavy military boots, dragging chains, and relentless knocking on doors all night long. And animals? They are highly sensitive to this stuff. Dogs will bark wildly at nothing. Cattle will flat out refuse to enter the property. And in some of the more severe lore, livestock will even produce black milk.
The sheer unnatural strength of this entity was put on full display when a local healer finally tried to confront it. Instead of being intimidated by his spiritual authority, the entity speaking right through the victim just mocked the guy. Then, she reached out, laced her fingers tightly through his, and effortlessly snapped 4 of his fingers completely backward. It's a pretty brutal reminder in the lore that these entities are not just ethereal little whispers. They are absolutely capable of inflicting severe, real-world physical damage.
So who actually falls victim to something like this? Well, the lore suggests the entity preys on very specific vulnerabilities. The driver in our case study was targeted for 3 main reasons. First, his panic-stricken fear created a massive energetic opening. Second, his consciousness was heavily impaired from drinking at the bus stop. And third, just sheer arrogance. He openly mocked the supernatural presence before he had any clue what he was actually dealing with. In these belief systems, mocking the unknown isn't just rude, it's a direct invitation.
As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to ask ourselves, are all these terrifying signs just the product of a profound psychological breakdown triggered by extreme stress and fear? Or is there a darker, untamed reality hiding just out of sight? Whether you view this as a fascinating cultural mechanism used to process trauma or a genuine, terrifying encounter with the unknown, the anatomy of this haunting leaves a deeply chilling imprint. So, what do you think is really happening in the shadows of that abandoned bus stop? Let that sink in.